Managing intellectual property has always been a significant challenge for all industries, and with digital transformation well underway, a growing number of companies need intellectual property management services. For ZDNet and Tech Republic, I'm Dan Patterson with Jeff Yasuda. He is the CEO of Feed.fm. Jeff has a long history in not just music, but other forms of intellectual property management, and now Feed takes care of rights management for all kinds of organizations. Jeff, thanks a lot for your time. First, I wonder if you could kind of define the scope of the problem. If you come from the music business, a lot of people understand about publishing and IP rights of music, but to the layperson, these are kind of a foreign language. So I wonder if you could define the scope of the problem and then the tech Feed uses to solve that problem.
Yeah, and Dan, it's obviously great to see you. It's been forever, but I think maybe just to sort of characterize the size of the industry here, it's important, and we fall into this broad category of content marketing. And content marketing, CMOs are spending about $313 billion annually on the space. And as you know, historically, people have done, text, so blogs, video, images. And what's really interesting here is that now, as we all know, the largest age group in the United States are young adults, so millennials and Gen Z. And lo and behold, they are way over indexed on music consumption. And so here you have kind of the three tenets or three pillars of, traditional content marketing. Why the hell aren't people doing music as well, and audio for that matter? And the answer, obviously, to kind of hit your point around intellectual property is threefold, but primarily licensing music is very, very hard, right? And I think, number one, the actual legality and understanding the complexity around licensing is profound, right? There are specialists, lawyers that, focus on this space that bill out at the low price of $1,000 an hour, right? Number two is it's very expensive, to license the content, right? And I think, the traditional ways of going direct to the rights holders is just not something that is in, that a lot of even big brands can afford. And the last comment I'll make, which you'll enjoy, is content curation is hard, right? While everyone thinks they are a DJ, the reality is they are not. And that's exactly where Feed.fm comes in to really handle kind of those three things in a turnkey solution for brands.
So typical rights organizations are ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC. They historically manage, if Joe Blow writes a song, Joe Blow sells that song to a record label, which handles the mechanical, meaning the actual physical production of a disc or the digital download, and a music publisher handles the distribution and the rights of the intellectual property of the song. Happy Birthday is a great example, but any song that you hear in a car commercial or commercially is handled through ASCAP, BMI, or SESAC. What Feed does is a little different, and I wonder if you could explain how you manage the rights of music and intellectual property and what types of content you manage.
Yeah, so, I think to explain, so we operate under the compulsory statutory license for internet radio. And there are really two primary rights holders that we work with. And there's kind of this great divide here. On one hand, you have this concept of sound recordings. The other is, as you said, composition or the publishing. Now, sound recordings, if Dan, you and I, wrote us, if you and I performed right now, you busted out your acoustic guitar and we record a song, let's say it's Yellow Submarine, that recording would constitute the sound recording, which is governed by the labels, okay, on that sphere. The other side, though, is that, well, that song, we didn't write that. That was obviously by the Beatles. That is dealing with the composition and the lyrics, the notes, all that good stuff, which is handled by the publishers. Okay, and so in the internet radio format, there's a group called Sound Exchange on this side of the divide that handles all of the sound recordings, so we pay them. And then on the other side are the PROs, or the performance rights organizations that you mentioned, ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. So that's how, and so our system actually records all the plays, tracks all that, and pays the rights holders through those organizations.
I asked you about the tech a moment ago, and this is for an analog company. These are kind of complicated issues to resolve, and they're complicated issues with a lot of overhead. So how does your tech reduce that overhead?
Yeah, so it is very complicated. What's really interesting is that even for big brands with their alleged massive balance sheets, they don't want to deal with any of this stuff. So the way that our platform works, what's interesting is that a lot of our clients, our partners, are actually not tech companies. So we have to make sure that it's super easy for them to integrate. And so essentially, we, in our platform, it's essentially an API. We house all of the content there. So if you, for example, at danpatterson.com wanted to put a music player in your app or on your website, you would tap into our infrastructure. We would give you, a series of different stations that you could play. And then essentially, as people come to your website to play music, we track that on our back end. We charge you a monthly fee. We take that and then distribute the monies to the proper rights holders. And that's all automated. It handles it at scale. And again, but it is hard, and it's something that's taken us years to develop.
And do you manage the music or IP in a physical space, or is it all within a website or an application?
So we are interesting. We've started in the digital world simply because we're able to track all the data. So we know what songs people like, what they dislike. We know particular actions that they take when listening to particular types of content. We are slowly getting pulled into the physical realm as well. So brick and mortar, is something some of our clients want a consistent content story across every customer touch point. So if it's in the app, if it's on the website, if it's in hold music, right? And if it's obviously in store, they want to start using our capabilities across all of those places where they interact with the customer.
What types of enterprises tap into your API, and in what ways do you help them, in addition to the technology, help them understand how to deploy intellectual property correctly?
Yeah, so I'll take you through a couple of examples. Maybe what we'll do is, fitness, apparel or e-commerce, and then maybe sports as kind of the three areas. So fitness has been an area that has really worked well for us recently. We power music solutions for great brands like Fitbit, ClassPass, MoveWith, Daily Burn, and the list goes on. And I think, what's interesting there is that, as you know, music is a core part of people's fitness routine or exercise routine, right? There's all the neurological sciences that indicate when listening to music, people's perception of the amount of time that they've worked out is dramatically less. So as you can imagine, for fitness companies, the reality is that people really don't like stock background music. They want to listen to music that they've heard before. And that's where we come in, where we actually power a legal music solution so that consumers have a great workout experience. And we've seen dramatic uplift in session time when they use our service versus not using music. So that's number one. Number two, apparel. We've been working closely with Charlotte Russe, for example, which is a female apparel company. They cater to a very mobile savvy and young demographic. And so, in this case, we've been powering music right in their app. And they've been really, I think, interested in having a much more developed stance on music as part of their content strategy. And so you can hear music, in social, in their app. And what we're trying to do is actually now migrate that to their in-store as well. The third is, and again, same sort of thing in an A/B test environment, we've seen dramatic lift in session time with versus without music. And then the third are, our local favorite team here, obviously the Golden State Warriors. We've been working with them for quite some time. And what's been kind of interesting there is, look, I'm a jazz head. Miles Davis, always used to say, it's not about the notes you play, it's about the spaces in between the notes you play. And similarly, it may not be about the songs, it could be about the spaces in between the songs. And that's where it's a pretty powerful way to insert maybe interstitials. Lawrence Scott, who's their beloved on-air personality, will often say, things in between the songs. They'll interview players, and ask Steph or Sean Livingston, hey, what's your, we always notice you're wearing cans when you walk into Oracle Arena. What song pumps you up before the game? And what's powerful is that context, the context is almost more important than the actual content, the actual music, why people like a particular song, why it's important to them, why it should be important to the fans. And it's really worked well, for them. So obviously music is core to the culture of the NBA. It's core to the culture of the Warriors. And, here's a great way to have another interface to interact with their fans.
Jeff Yasuda is the CEO of Feed.fm. Jeff, your career began in finance at Lehman Brothers before founding a number of startups, including one many in the social space may know, Blip.fm, then Fuzz, now Feed. You've diligently tracked music and intellectual property in the technology space for over a decade. I wonder if you have any advice to leave us with for other enterprises who may not think of themselves as tech companies, but who are undergoing a digital transformation and may need to license not just music, but other IP rights. What advice would you share for companies entering the digital space on how to tackle intellectual property?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole adage that some have used around, infringe, get big, and ask for forgiveness is something that has never worked. And I think part of the reason, we created our platform and our product is to make it so easy for folks that it's almost easier to just use somebody like a Feed FM than to, sort of play the Wild West game and just make a lot of, sort of unhappy, relationships, with the rights holders. I think not just music itself, but content in general, it is owned by the creators of that content and they should be compensated. I think, generally though, in the past, particularly around music, licensing has been shrouded in sort of this, in this way that it's made it very difficult for folks who want to pay to actually use the content and license it properly. So my general advice is, play by the rules. There are ways to have cost-effective access to the content, but I think it's important to understand the risk profile of sort of playing in the Wild West and kind of do the right thing is probably the best thing to say.